I'm a 32-year-old guy who considers himself pretty easygoing, but let's face it, everyone has their breaking point. I've got a stable job, pay my bills, and generally stick to my own lane. For the past 2 years, I've been in a relationship with my girlfriend. Let's call her G. Things weren't flawless between us, but they were solid enough that I started picturing a future together. A few months back, G began talking about wanting a proper vacation, a real escape, not just a quick road trip. Cancun seemed like the perfect destination. Sunshine, beaches, and a chance to relax. It sounded like exactly what we both needed. We flew out on a Friday morning, and G was in unusually high spirits, almost giddy. At the time, I chalked it up to excitement about the trip, but in hindsight, there were small red flags I ignored. For instance, she was glued to her phone during the entire flight. Whenever I glanced over, she tilted the screen away. I joked, "What's so important that you can't disconnect for a few hours?" She brushed it off, saying it was just work. By the time we landed, I had convinced myself I was overthinking things. The first couple of days went smoothly. We lounged by the pool, tried out local restaurants, and took goofy vacation photos, like any other couple. But on the third day, something felt off. G kept stepping away to take work calls. It seemed odd for someone who had insisted on unplugging and relaxing. Later that afternoon, she said, "I'm going to check out some shops down the street. Wanna come?" I was sprawled on a lounge chair with a cocktail in hand, feeling lazy. "Nah, I'm good." "Bring me back something cool," I replied. She smiled, but it wasn't her usual smile. It felt strained, almost like she was relieved I'd declined. Then she left. Something about her energy nagged at me. I'm not typically the jealous or suspicious type, but for some reason, I decided to follow her. After waiting about 10 minutes, I headed toward the shops. It didn't take long to spot her. She was at a coffee shop, but she wasn't alone. Across from her sat a man I instantly recognized, her ex. They were laughing like they'd just shared an inside joke. Let me explain. G had a complicated past with this guy. They'd been on and off for years before we met, and she had assured me it was over. She even showed me messages where she told him to leave her alone. Seeing them together felt like a gut punch. I wasn't ready to confront her, though. I didn't want to create a scene. Instead, I hung back and discreetly took a few photos on my phone as evidence. My heart was pounding, but I kept my cool. I followed them from a distance as they left the cafe and headed to a nearby park. They seemed too comfortable together, too close. At one point, she hugged him before they went their separate ways. I could have confronted her right then, but I held back. I wanted to see how deep this went. When she returned to the hotel, she was all smiles. The shops were great. "I got you something," she said, handing me a cheesy souvenir keychain. "Thanks," I replied, forcing a smile. "Looks like you had fun." "Yeah, it was nice to get out for a bit," she said, showing no hint of guilt. That night, while she was in the shower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked her phone. I know it's not okay, but I needed answers. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Their messages revealed they'd been planning this for weeks. This wasn't just a romantic getaway for us. It was a setup for her to meet him. She'd told him she missed him, still thought about him, and needed closure. Closure? Really? I barely slept that night, but by morning, I had a plan. The next day, I pretended everything was fine. We went snorkeling, had lunch, and even strolled along the beach at sunset. All the while, I was mentally preparing my next move. That evening, I told her I wasn't feeling well and wanted to stay in. She seemed a little disappointed, but didn't argue. "I'm thinking about heading out for a bit," she said casually. "Sure," I replied, keeping my tone steady. The moment she left, I sprang into action. I quickly packed my belongings, called the airline, and booked the earliest flight back home. Then I went to the front desk and canceled our room, citing an emergency. By the time she returned to the hotel later that night, I was long gone. I left her a note. "Gee, I know about your little meetup with X's name. I hope it was worth it. The room is canceled, and I'm on a flight home. Good luck sorting everything out. Was it harsh? Maybe, but it was what she deserved. On the flight home, I couldn't stop replaying the last 2 years in my mind. The red flags I had brushed aside seemed glaringly obvious now. The secretive texts, the flimsy excuses, and the way she downplayed her history with her ex. I felt foolish for not recognizing it sooner. But more than anything, I felt a sense of relief. When I landed, I blocked her on everything: her number, social media, email. I had no interest in hearing her excuses or explanations. A few days later, mutual friends began reaching out. Apparently, G was telling them I had abandoned her in Mexico. Did she tell you why? I asked one of them. She just said you freaked out and left, they replied. I calmly sent them the screenshots and photos I had taken. That put an end to their questions pretty quickly. The fallout for G was brutal. She had to book a last-minute flight home, which cost her a fortune. Her ex completely ghosted her after she explained what happened. And as the truth spread among our mutual friends, many began distancing themselves from her. As for me, I was doing better than ever. Walking away from that relationship was the smartest thing I'd ever done. If there's one lesson I took from all of this, it's to trust your gut and never let anyone walk all over you. I thought the drama was over, but G wasn't one to let things end quietly. About a week after I got home, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. It didn't take long to figure out it was her. The email was a mess, full of poorly constructed apologies, weak excuses, and outright lies. She claimed meeting her ex was a spur-of-the-moment decision and insisted she hadn't meant for it to happen. She begged me to talk to her, swearing I'd misunderstood everything. Misunderstood? I had photos. I had text messages. What exactly was there to misunderstand? I ignored her email entirely. A couple of days later, one of her friends, someone I'd always gotten along with, called me. You really hurt her, they said. Hurt her. I replied, barely holding back my frustration. Do you even know what she did? She said she met her ex, but it's not what you think. She just wanted to clear the air. Clear the air? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Because sneaking around and hugging him is a totally honest way to do that, right? I forwarded them the same screenshots and evidence I had shared with others. That ended the conversation abruptly. I thought I'd heard the last of it, but G wasn't done. She started spinning a new narrative where I was the villain. According to her, I was controlling, paranoid, and had ruined the trip because I couldn't handle her staying friends with her ex. She even accused me of stealing her belongings when I left, which was ridiculous considering I barely had enough time to grab my own things. Then she took her lies to social media, portraying herself as a victim of my supposed jealous rage. I wasn't bothered by her fabrications, but I never imagined how far she'd go. One morning, I woke up to a message from my boss asking me to call right away. Concerned, I did. What's going on? I asked. We received an email claiming you've been acting erratically and could be a danger to the team, he said. It included screenshots where you supposedly admitted to being unstable. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. None of that's true, I said, trying to keep calm. We figured. My boss reassured me. But HR needs you to come in and address it. When I saw the email, my stomach turned. G had fabricated screenshots to make it look like I'd been ranting and making threats. The fakes were poorly done, full of typos and strange formatting, but it was still deeply unsettling. Thankfully, HR and my boss saw through it and dismissed it as a hoax. However, the damage to my reputation lingered, and I knew exactly who was behind it. That was the final straw. If G wanted a fight, she had picked the wrong person. I consulted a lawyer and explained everything. Her lies, the fake screenshots, and her attempt to sabotage my career. The lawyer recommended sending a cease and desist letter, which I promptly did. The letter was direct. detailing her actions and warning her that I would pursue legal action for defamation and harassment if she didn't stop. To drive the message home, I had it delivered by a process server. Her reaction was exactly what I expected. She texted me from a new number, ranting in all caps about how I was overreacting and ruining her life. "You're doing that yourself," I replied before blocking her again. Then I got strategic. G had always overshared on social media, and it didn't take long for me to find posts and comments that exposed her true nature. She had openly bragged about conning people, flaking on commitments, and even hinted at sabotaging past relationships. I saved everything, not to use against her immediately, but just in case she escalated further. And escalate she did. When she realized the legal threat was serious, she doubled down, trying to turn more of our mutual friends against me. She claimed the cease and desist letter was my attempt to silence her. But by that point, most of our friends were already on my side. They had seen the evidence. The backlash was swift. People began calling her out publicly, questioning her lies about the trip, the texts, and me. Some unfollowed her online, while others cut ties completely. The final blow came from her ex. Apparently, he had no idea she was in a relationship when they met in Cancun. Once he found out, he posted a scathing rant online, calling her a manipulative liar and warning others to stay far away from her. It was brutal and well-deserved. By the time the dust settled, G's reputation was in shambles. She deleted all her social media accounts and vanished. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she moved to another city, but by then, I had stopped caring. Revenge isn't always the answer, but in this case, it felt justified. She tried to destroy my life, and all I did was shine a light on the truth. Looking back, I'm thankful for everything that happened. It taught me to trust my instincts and never settle for someone who doesn't respect me.